So we have our disaster response preparedness teams working on it and things, but that is a very critical. And do we have control when it comes to the city? No, we can pass a resolution. They don't matter. It's rail and it's public transportation. Here it comes through. So we just hope that they're careful and vigilant and we're watching and prepared.
Do those trains that carry oil go by the university?
That's the train line. I would assume so, because you see those black cars go through, but hopefully they're safe. And you're right. It's a worry. It's a worry. It's a concern.
Some of those black cars have corn syrup in them too, so they're not all oil.
Even more dangerous.
Thank you. My name is Leanne Stout from Buffalo, and we're a town of 200 people. Like we were saying, half the towns in North Dakota are that small. And we are trying to experience growth, but we don't know how to go about that when infrastructure costs of developing housing can be up to $1 million for our lift stations, our water, our streets. How do you justify developing when it may only benefit 8 to 10 families coming to a small town? We don't have the jobs, but they may want to live there. And we're really on the fence as far as how do we go forward, because we don't want to be stagnant, because then we die. But we can't invest $1 million in infrastructure for new development. Does anybody have a fast and quick response for that?
Well, in Minnesota, we created, in Warren, we have a developer that, that opened up some of his farmland to create a development. In Minnesota, we created what they call a TIF district, and we were able to delay his payments for this water and sewer that we put through the community, delay it, and so in the hopes that he would sell these lots based on some kind of a projection that somebody came up with and be able to recoup his costs. So that's how it was done, but you still need somebody willing to step up. And then there's always the assessment. If you have your assessment ordinance or policy in place too on how you assess those costs.
In Grand Forks, we had the Blue Ribbon Housing Commission after the last day of the city, and so you had a group of people come together, and the idea was to show the developers it's okay to develop. And now there's like buildings on every corner now, but we had to develop confidence in the investors so they would invest, and we had to show them the projection. But the money has to come from somewhere. You're right. But now we're growing.
But then we were watching what was going on in Grand Forks, and how they defined affordable housing. The median household income was, I think, was $49,500. And they multiplied it times 3, so got you around about $150K for what affordable housing should be for Grand Forks. And so we applied that back to our county, and for Benson County, we're at about 96. And it's pretty hard to build a good home for $96,000. The other part, my wife and I, when we sold our place in Grand Forks and moved home, we built a house there. We used the money that we had here in order to build there, and then mortgage out the rest of it. But I think the thing is that what we were worried about is that in Grand Forks, construction was going on, and the house value was going up the more we paid into it over the years. And that home, what we were worried about is that we were building there, but we're going to spend $140K in order to build a simple ranch style house. But was it going to be worth that when we got them building it? And I think that's a consideration, especially for young families as they develop those homes in rural communities. And I don't know how to address that. But if the one thing is, I think where communities can make it more affordable is if they were to provide the infrastructure in order to do that, and perhaps do what Grand Forks did, especially during the flooding time, where they had allow for, I think it was, I can't remember the amount, but there was something for first-time home buyers or for those that were buying homes, where they bought down the cost of that home for those community members in order to keep them there. And that was a community thing. So it was a $120,000 home, but they were able to purchase it for $100,000, and as long as they lived there for 5 years or whatever it was. And that was at a time when Grand Forks was trying to keep people in the community rather than them have them all migrate out. So I think those are considerations just that we're experiencing right now in our community.
In the back. With growth comes need for volunteers for emergency responses, fires, ambulances. How are you towns keeping the people in those positions? The volunteers.
You really hit a nail on the head there. In small towns, it's difficult. In our town, as soon as you move into town, there is somebody from the ambulance corps or somebody from the fire department that is courting you, trying to engage you, and trying to get you involved in as being a volunteer for one of those two departments.
When I moved to Cheyenne, almost 15 years ago, I'm originally from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. When I first moved, like you said, they come to your front door, and ask you to volunteer. And I got asked to be a volunteer fireman, so I did that, and I still help out when I can, but it's just hard to get people to volunteer for anything anymore. It seems like you just have certain ones that they've been there. Some of the firemen that are there now that were there when I first came to Cheyenne. So it's a problem sometimes keeping enough volunteer help.
In Hallock, there again, we've been fortunate again, it's the people that drive it. The private citizens of the community, our fire department's real active, and we're working with them right now. And there again, as far as the city council, we can be there to help them as far as, of course, financially, and fire department, fire hall and equipment, and we share in a lot of those costs. But it's the people that drive it. Same thing with investments. That's, say, in Warren, it's private individuals that are driving it, and the city's facilitating with the functions in the state of Minnesota. The TIF, tax increment financing, is just a program that's one way to tap into that. But there again, it can't be the government. Definitely have to be a part of it, but it needs to come from the grassroots and the people of the community too. And that's the problem is of course the population sizes. If you're lucky, they're holding firm, otherwise they're dropping. But as far as getting burnt out, that happens too. But it's just again initiative of the citizens to do whatever they can on their own.
In Lakota, we're kind of lucky because we haven't had any trouble with volunteers for the fire department, and I'm not sure if that's because of the beverages after the meeting or. But the ambulance we have a little bit of trouble with. We're having trouble finding drivers here and there. My sister-in-law, she is does the recruiting and stuff for the ambulance, but they are having trouble with finding drivers and EMTs in Lakota. So that's one of the issues that we're having right now. I don't know if it's because of the training, because of the EMT thing, or what the deal is, or maybe they should start serving beverages after their meeting too. I don't know.
One of the problems in recruiting volunteers is liability. How do you protect your volunteers?
As far as the fire department in the city of Emerado, they're protected through the workers' comp, and the city covers the workers' comp for those volunteers.
I will also add to that almost all cities in North Dakota belong to the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, and they pay premiums for that liability. So there is an insurance coverage option out there. Hey, she was first, and then you, and then you.
Who pays this insurance?
The city.
The city pays, yeah.
And the insurance premiums are based on the city's population.
Go ahead, it's a tavern, so I'll
Oh.
get back to you later.
Okay, I come from Northwood, North Dakota, so I'm a small town. How, as you as mayors, are you recruiting young people, young families? Because I see we have done a great job of getting a lot of young families in the communities, and I think it's a really rebirth for communities is to get these young families, get young individuals. And how are you working to get, you know, people that are coming out of college and saying, come back to your hometown or come to, you know, Hallock, come to Warren? Because I think that's a big part of small towns is getting that action, getting that life back in.
Well, in Emerado, I don't think we're actively recruiting young people to come. It's that the housing market's changed to the point that young people can afford the housing, and the housing is now available in our community, and it's available at a lesser rate than Grand Forks or other communities too. So housing in Emerado is, well, even in Grand Forks, because I know some people that are in realty, that it's a housing shortage to sell homes, not to buy them. Well, to buy them, but I mean, it's easy to sell them. But even in Emerado, the houses go fast and younger people are buying them. Oh, sorry.
For the city of Warren, we don't have any active recruitment going on either, but we happen to be a bedroom community that's about a 30-minute drive from Thief River, Grand Forks, and Crookston. So there are numerous people that come to live in a small town. The housing is cheaper, but we also, just like all of Northwest Minnesota and Northeast North Dakota, we are in a housing shortage. For trying to attract people to our area to find a place for them to live is difficult.
In the city of Cheyenne, I'm seeing more young couples come into town, and a lot of times it's the houses that become available are houses that the mother and father have passed away, and the kids inherit the home. So some of these people coming in are, you know, building a house is so high, you know, and this opportunity of owning their parents' home or their grandparents or whatever, and that's where they end up at. And, you know, I'm seeing quite a bit of that now.
So I just moved to a tiny, a small town. And so they have the opportunity to engage me, but nobody has. I'm curious if you guys have any kind of integration ideas for young people who move to your town. How are you reaching out to them? How are they finding out about things? Because what I've found, and I'm actually from near the town where I live, but I think there's a lot of assumption that people know what's going on, except that they don't. Because if they've never encountered these things, they wouldn't know. Because you only know what you know.
Well, in Emerado, there is a website that we have for the city of Emerado, but when new people do come, they have to set the accounts up with the city, and there's letters that go out with them for the information that they need to know, when the garbage is picked up, all that kind of stuff. So it's right away that they're given that information, and where obviously they're at the city hall when they do that, but they know they're told about the city government and ordinances. Some of them that are important are also in that letter that goes out.
Let's just follow up on that question real quickly. I'm sorry, yeah, you want to say something? No, go ahead. Go first.
Okay. No, in the city of Warren, we have our own website. We also are trying to polish up our Facebook skills and be more engaged like that. And then when somebody comes in to set up an account for their utilities, then we have a brochure that we hand out that lists our businesses, our organizations also, and then our city government stuff.
Yeah, you know, the other part too is that, to tell a story, my mom is from the Fort Worth Reservation. So she married to my dad, who's from the Spirit Lake Reservation. And she's been living there since 1970 now, but she's still not from there. You know, and so I think, and this is not an Indian thing, you know, this is a rural thing. Until you get, I heard somebody else say this, and they said, until you have a couple of generations in that graveyard, you're not really from there. You know, so, but I think the thing is that, take the opportunity within your new community to go out there and network up as much as possible, and visit with those that are on it, because they're kind of, I think people are kind of stand off a little bit, even though they'll wave at you when they pass you. You know, I heard somebody say that in the last session, they're still going to stand out, and somebody will connect with you, and pretty soon that person's from the community, and that goes out like wildfire. You know, so I've shared that a little bit with you. Thank you.
Let's follow up on that communication piece, just real briefly. Everybody under the age of 30, raise your hand. All right? How many of you, when you're looking for city information, would go to a website first? Facebook, second. Okay? Twitter, Pinterest, Roku, Netflix. So, what you heard from the young people is the need to have a good website. There's lots of websites out there, and I'm certainly not going to hold ours up as one of the best, because it isn't. There's lots of websites out there, but they use a website differently than we use it. If they can't find what they need in the first 10 seconds, they're moving on. True or false, people?
True.
So, it's one thing to build a website, you have to maintain it. And you have to maintain it with those younger folks in mind.
This is kind of off of her question and the question before, and also the question of issues. As a professor at the University of North Dakota, I also teach methods and applied anthropology and applied ways of using our discipline. How can the university help you solve the problems that you've talked about here? I mean, part of Community Connect is so that we can reach across, we can work with you. And what I would want to know as a professor is what kind of issues do you have in your community that you need somebody to, like a student, to come out and do research and provide you with information that will kind of create this feedback loop so we can make stronger communities and have the university become part of that. And not just be this sort of enclave out on the prairie somewhere doing education to get people to go out and get jobs. I mean, you also want to talk about quality of life and the meaning of life and, how to make better communities. And what an incredible opportunity for students to actually be able to do that. So how can you all reach out to us?
We're already doing that to some degree in the city of Warren. We're engaging with the University of Minnesota Crookston students. We've got some landscaping goals that we'd like to achieve for our entrances into our town, so we've asked for some input from them. We've got another class that's helping us with our comprehensive planning also. So we are, and you guys probably have that available through UND too, but those are the things, when you're in a small town, you need to be able to figure out how to do something for free if you can, and not have to pay the architects or the engineers. Sometimes you have to, but there are some things where you don't have to, and so to get some expertise, it's kind of useful when it's students, because they kind of have their own ideas, and they're really refreshing.
So Deb, did you reach out to UMC, or did they reach out to you?
We actually reached out to them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
And the same for us. And right now we have a tremendous need for social workers within our community, and so we've contacted the social work department, and we're looking at having some meetings to address that need.
I did see a hand back here. Was there one after this gentleman? Was there another one besides the gentleman here in the black? Okay. We'll take this as the last question then, and one more from the lady from Buffalo? Yes. Okay, so we'll take the lady in the red as last, and then Dana, you can do a wrap-up. How's that sound?
Yeah, you talked about selling homes in your communities and that, and I know that all communities have this problem. And that is, what do you do, and what other parts of the government within, or that you use for Like if you have homes that are either condemned or need to get condemned or cleaned out, where lots could be available for sale to bring in new people. What kind of collaboration do you do with health departments, police? How do you get that accomplished?
In Emerado, it's a growing pain. It really is. And it all boils down to dollars. So that our ordinances are strong. We have the support of our police. We have collaboration with the health department. But when you write the letters and you send them out, they got 60 days to fix it. If they fix that problem, you're right back to square one, and it still looks the same as what it did before, to you. But it all boils down to having the strong ordinances. We do have collaboration with the health department downtown. We do work with them. And it's just a matter of the dollars and cents to get to that stage where you're actually, if the person didn't fix it, then you can take them to court and finish the process out. Which we have done in some cases. Some of the buildings that were that way, they just didn't, once the letters were written, they took it upon themselves to pull the buildings down. And that's what we would like to see, is that we could get it done without having to go to litigation. But there is some strong-willed people, even in Emerado, that will fight us. So, here, I'll turn it.
I know in Lakota we had a hotel that was on the frontage road, and I think it was built in 1883. And it wasn't really condemned, but it was a real eyesore. So we worked it out with the owner that he would clean out all his antiques and stuff, or supposed antiques in the hotel, and then the city bought that actual hotel for $10,000. And we hired Hooterite Colony and a person that is asbestos trained, and we had that torn down. So, and it wasn't that expensive either. I think it was $12,000 to have it torn down. So we're hoping to turn that land back over for commercial use, because it is a pretty prime piece of land. It's on the frontage road. And that's what we do.
And the same thing for us as a tribal government. There's been some older buildings that have been abandoned. And one of them is owned by one of our local churches, but they built a new church since then, so we're working with them. And we're looking to trade them for that land. And then we, as a government, we're able to apply for grants in order to tear that building down. But also that in regard to the asbestos, and there was some mold in that building that has to be remediated first before we're able to tear the facility down. Otherwise, we could, we might get charged. So but there's monies available from EPA in order to get that taken care of before we tear it down.
We'll have a last question.
Well, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment as to what Muriel was talking about when newcomers come to your community. Obviously, the city is their first contact and they get some valuable information. But in conjunction with that, either a community club or some organization in your town needs to reach out to these new people. In Buffalo, we do the newcomers, and we have a bag that welcomes them, but you go knock on their door, you hand them the bag, and you visit with them, and you exchange phone numbers, and then you invite them to the next meeting of whatever organization they're interested in, and you go pick them up. And you make sure you have their phone number, because the telephone is still the best way to communicate.
Thank you. She's absolutely correct.
And she's my sister.
Uh-oh. I feel so badly for you. Everybody has a cross to bear, though, don't they? All right. Let me see if my memory is here. Whether it was railroad safety, reaching out to new people, affordable housing, railroad safety, water, sewer, infrastructure, volunteers, emergency responders, new employees, retaining existing employees, all of those issues are on the docket of the League of Cities. We hear those issues every day, and they are issues that are all across North Dakota, and as you just heard, they extend into North Dakota, or into Minnesota, excuse me. So the process becomes, what can you address in the most timely and cost-efficient manner, and what options and alternatives are available out there. So I'm going to put in a plug. We have an annual conference every year. This year it's in Minot, League of Cities Annual Conference. It's September 25th to the 27th. Whether you're an elected official, appointed official, city council, city commission, the dog catcher, you can attend. Some of those issues are going to be discussed in a forum such as this. Some of those issues are going to be discussed when colleagues get a chance to get together and just to visit. The best way to learn something is from somebody that's already done it. There are lots of options out there to address some of the needs that have been expressed here this afternoon. Whether it's through the Bank of North Dakota, the Housing Finance Agency, USDA Rural Development, TIF districts, Renaissance zones, but it's difficult to keep track of all of those. So one of the league responsibilities is to try to make sure that you as community citizens, whether you're elected or not, understand what those available options and alternatives are. To try to help you address the issues that you're experiencing in your communities. It's an uphill battle, but there is funds available. Not all of it is grant money, I'm going to warn you right up front. But a lot of it is very low interest, and it's just a matter of penciling out the numbers, as Mayor Brown said. What's your risk tolerance? What can the city afford to carry in general obligation bonds or in special assessment bonds, and for how long? It's really what it comes down to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana. I'm sorry that I probably took up a bunch of your time. Keep in mind, Dana, that we're standing between them and lunch.
Thank you, Blake. And I want to say Blake's comment earlier about me being the one wannabe mayor on this panel, well, there's a little bit of truth to that, too.
All right.
I'm someone, and don't worry, I'm not planning on running anytime soon. But as a person who studies state and local issues, I've talked to a lot of mayors and people in mayors' administrations over the years. And one of the things that has always struck me is just how proud mayors are of their towns. I mean, that's something, I've seen that enthusiasm come out again and again over time. And maybe just to carry this story out just a little bit further, I was doing a research project, and I was interviewing people in HUD in DC, and the mayor of Syracuse, Roy Bernardi, had been asked by the Bush administration and then confirmed by the Senate, but he was the assistant secretary of HUD, and typically in a situation like that, I would address him as Mr. Secretary, but his handler said, no, he won't take any of that, you address him as the mayor. And that was his calling, that was his true love in public service, and I just thought that was really interesting. And the entire department, 11,000 people in that building, referred to him as the mayor, not the assistant secretary. So I think that speaks a little something about just this real connection that mayors have to their cities. And with that, mayors really are the focal point to the cities. And sometimes we as citizens, we forget some of the constraints they have. There are constraints that the states put on them. Sometimes mayors are what we call strong mayors, where they have lots of formal powers and they rate the budget. Sometimes mayors are what we call weak mayors, where they're more of the council and they don't have a power of veto. But yet, or maybe they're part of the council that oversees a city manager, but yet they still are the focal person of the city. And a person that I interviewed a number of years ago, he carried a notebook around because he understood that he had a 24-hour job, right? You guys know this, 24 hours a day. He carried a notebook around, and he also told me that as mayor, he was also a chief pothole response team. And you guys know this. So half of the complaints, half of the comments he fielded that he put in his little notebook were specific locations of potholes, which isn't his job, but it is really. And so he would write this down, and then the next day or Monday, if he was at his kid's basketball game, he'd jot this down, and then he'd field it to the appropriate person. So the mayors, they are the first point of contact for a lot of citizens. When we think of something, we might not think, oh, I need to call the streets department. I need to call the mayor's office. And so again, the first point of contact. So that's a huge burden. So they're really the people out front that are thinking about how to respond to these particular issues. And I tried to summarize some of these themes today, and Blake's comments earlier too, we have almost 357 organized cities in North Dakota, and that's a lot. And some people like to say that North Dakota has more democracy than any other state in the union, and if you break it down, we have one unit of government for every 262 people. So, that's a lot of democracy, that's a lot of citizen input. And so how do you channel this? And there's some real opportunities there. Lisa this morning talked about social capital, but one thing that she didn't tell you is that on a particular scholar's social capital index, Robert Putnam, he has North Dakota ranked as #1 in social capital, and this spills over to Minnesota too, western Minnesota. We know this, and we all know living in North Dakota why we have such high levels of social capital, because people are willing to help out, people are willing to help their neighbors. A lot of the people in small towns I've spoken to, they really rely on that sort of third sector, that not-for-profit or that social entrepreneur sector to help them get things done, and that is so important. And that's something that can be leveraged, but we have to be careful too, because we can get volunteer fatigue. You ask the same people to really step up over and over again. So that's something that we always have to be a little bit conscious of. Some of the challenges that I've heard you guys talk about today, the lack of volunteers, lack of resources, really trying to find that best balance between resources, or not just resources, but the services that people want and how much they're willing to pay in taxes. And that's a really tough line to figure out sometimes. We all love our resources, but we only have our tax tolerance is just so high, and then we start to grumble as a citizenry, and then you have to feel those complaints as well. And one of the things too, and certainly Blake through the League of Municipalities, I think maybe can be a conduit to this, but thinking about how the state can partner to make it easier. When you have lack of resources, and I think you guys are doing a lot of the right things, looking at leveraging economies of scale. Let's share some of the resources. Yeah, we have plows, but if there's a city 10 miles down the road, how can we share those resources so we all pull into those? There can be some dangers in that as well. The cities can be competitive. Sometimes the competition is very healthy, but sometimes you really have to work to maintain those relationships and keep them healthy. And so that's something to think about too as you go forward and you look for those opportunities. But getting back to that idea of social capital, we're in a state where people are willing to help each other out, and so I think we can, and there's high trust in government as well. If you look at that Gallup poll that was released about 2 weeks ago, 77% of North Dakotans indicate that they trust government a great deal or a fair amount. That's amazing. That was #1 in the union as far as states go, and western Minnesota falls into that category as well, and you see this. So you already have a citizenry that is willing to engage, and so trying to tap into that, I think is one of the big challenges. But again, it looks like you guys are doing a lot of things right. You're acting in entrepreneurial ways, getting your message out there to the community through social media and through Facebook or other venues as well. The example I heard about focusing on different policy domains, the youth council example, trying to find commonality within a certain policy area. Try to think of how you can leverage those ideas. You can't get one group of people in a room to solve all the city's problems, but if you can just focus on very specific examples, I think that's a really good way to start. And it builds social capital. It builds these loose networks and these relationships that can be leveraged or tapped later on. And that's a good thing. Building community among cities. I think that's a really important lesson to take away from this today. And then looking to larger cities, I think Mayor Brown had a great point when he stated that if all the cities in a region do well, everybody does well. And so it really pays to think that way. And again, necessity is the mother of invention. So if you can think of ways or think of needs and how other cities or how tapping the expertise of people in other cities might help you, that's also a really good avenue to pursue. So I was told that I'm standing in the way between our audience and lunch, so maybe I'll go ahead and wrap it there. But let's hear a big hand for all of the mayors and the sheriffs.
I get close. We did one question on that.
Yeah, sure.
More of a statement. With what you were saying about all the entrepreneurial ideas that we plan, about the ways to that goes. With all the entrepreneurial saying that there's, professing that towns are doing, it's awesome that people are doing, website stuff, cool, that's awesome, great, but it's more of, okay, what's the youngest member on all your people's housing? So if I go into your town hall, who's the youngest person there? Who's the youngest person that goes to your meetings? I actually won't answer it.
I'm not sure the age of the youngest person on my council, but I think it's in the lower 30s, maybe upper 20s, I'm not sure.
Why is it that old?
Why is it that old?
Why can't it be someone?
Because no one else is running.
Yeah.
No one lets them. No one.
Anyone can run for council.
Yeah, I know, but who says a high school student couldn't be on the council to help?
Law.
No one thinks about it. You have a huge community, you have abilities everywhere, but everybody always goes, well, he's been in the community 30 years. So what? I lived in my town for 18 years. I have just so much ability. I've grown up there. My parents moved there. I've been there longer than technically.
I think that you have to be 18 in the state of Minnesota to run for elected office.
Well, it's not the elected office kind of say, it's more like if a high school student goes, well, yeah, we have a bunch of issues in our town, then why can't they go address their stuff to the town hall? But yet they'll go, oh, it's just a kid, complaining about potholes, yeah, sure, whatever. No, they're going, hey, we have real issues here, but no one takes it to effect. Yeah, you want to get in contact with the community through Facebook, online, whatever, sure, through the schools. But who says that you can't have someone, there professing like, hey, we have issues through our school, like teachers are complaining and stuff that we hear every day. I've heard it throughout all of high school, people complaining, but I didn't see anything done about it. Brought to the board every day, didn't care.
Within the city, actually last year or the year before, we had a group of 12, 13, or 14-year-old kids come and present to the city council their interest in a skateboarding rink and some jumps and things like that. That was very effective. They got it. So kids can, but they have to know the avenue.
Yeah. But there's people who do that. I'm just saying, if you guys were to get a younger community onto your boards, that's huge for new ideas. Like, I'm just a kid at UND, yeah, so what? That doesn't mean anything. If I said that beforehand, we've done anything about it. But just because one kid has ideas, like a group of class that came in that's 25, doesn't mean that you can't change something. Like you were saying, entrepreneurial.
Well, there are all kinds of ways to get engaged too, and I think you have something there when you say because of your youth, maybe you're not taking it seriously. And you see other sectors of society too, where somebody might have to work a little bit harder to get noticed or to get their ideas heard. And it just might mean that you have to yell a little bit louder or be a little bit more persistent. But I teach. My primary audience is 18 to 22-year-olds, right? And I see a lot of good ideas. I have students writing letters to their elected officials, and they get responses back. Now, that's not to say that their ideas are always good. A lot of times they are, maybe sometimes they aren't. But the fact is, it sounds like, at least in my experience, people are listening. But that's not to say that someone with 30 years experience in the community has good ideas either. Sometimes it's let's keep the status quo, and that's not always a good thing either because then you become stagnant. And so I think it's important to try to solicit that new blood and those new ideas. But there is that legal barrier. You have to be 18, but that doesn't mean that communities can't think of ways to incorporate youth. One of the things you're getting into is this idea of youth suffrage, and some communities entertain that idea. Let's let 16-year-olds vote for school board members, for example, because they're the direct constituents of their decisions. I don't have a problem with that, but it does take a legal mechanism to make that work.
Yeah, because even with, I don't need them to be, on the board, they don't have to be paid or anything like that. You have, an assistant, bring the meetings, they can shoot ideas whenever they want.
Yeah, and certainly internships too. We work very hard to place students in certain internships, and I don't know how many of you have had interns, but they can certainly inject some good ideas just from their enthusiasm, from a different point of view. And I think there are all kinds of, and I think you raise a really good point